Live and direct.
Oh,
Yes. New year ticker. Live and
live and direct. Yeah.
live and direct. Great. I'm really excited about today. Really excited that we're in the studio. We're gonna talk about life, love, education,
There you go.
and all good things, So I'm just really pleased to be able to have you on today. Just knowing about your work and knowing about all the different things you do, your education consultant, your social, emotional, mental health, SEN specialist, award-winning author, action hero, teacher, you know, Amazon best-selling, like Poor Poupe, Karl Poupe, you just been smashing it, you know what I mean? So, Karl, I'm really, and when I'm looking at everything, Karl, I'm like, Karl Poupe is guanin. He's really representing and doing his thing. So, just really wants to get you in. I mean, really
Yeah.
passionate about young people, passionate about young lives, passionate about what they're going through, but also a proponent to being able to transform and make a difference, because a lot of times we can watch what's going on or watch at the degradation or look at the narrative of what people are saying about young people. And sometimes we're not really presenting ideas to improve or change or encourage or advance, So I'm really looking forward to us being able to talk today and us being able to go into a bit of your work and find out about what you do, how you do it, and why you do it. And really, I'm really interested in the man behind the man, because a lot of times people just see one's professional persona, but they don't see one's heart, or they don't see the impetus of why someone does what they do. So you're today the expert, the behavior expert, the management expert, but I want to be able to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself. Many people would say different things about you, Karl. Many people would say that you're advancing, teacher, management, classroom management, behavior specialist, proof specialist, whatever it is. But how would you introduce yourself?
Fantastic. Herman, I just want to say, first of all, I haven't got any money to pay you for the intro you gave me. So there's no brown envelopes in your house. I'm sorry, sir. Cost of living crisis, sir. Cost of living crisis. But thank you. It's a real blessing. Thank you. And it's an honor to be on your show, and thank you for inviting me. So how would I describe myself? So I'm Karl C. Poupe. Yes, everything you've basically said. So I'm a former teacher now because I've left the classroom. So I'm an education consultant, author, speaker, especially keynote speaker, who specializes in dealing with kids that are hard to engage. All right, because we can use all these fancy acronyms of SEN, SEMH, ODD. I call it Jackson 5, ABC, 1, 2, 3, ODD.
Okay, yeah.
Right, but it's basically trying to reach kids that are hard to reach. That is basically my remit. And off the back of that, that's where I've built my life's work. Most people probably know me for my first book called The Action Hero Teacher, which will be 5 years old in March, which is amazing. Time has really flown.
Yes.
And basically, also, what I want people to know is that I specialize in talking to Gen Z and Generation Alpha kids. Now, what we've got to understand is this generation of kids are different. They are very different because of we're in an information revolution, and I can talk for hours about that. That's a passion of mine. The system is not equipped, no longer fit for purpose. It's obsolete compared to what's coming down the pipe in terms of social media, the internet, and now including AI. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Terminator, is getting involved in this as well. So, our kids are educated in a different way. So that's basically who I am. And the reason why I'm very passionate about that work was because I was one of those hard to reach kids. I was one of those kids, and it took particular mentors and people that helped me. And if they didn't help me, I wouldn't be sitting before you today. So that's where the passion comes from.
Okay, so listening to what you're saying and listening to all that you've done. I mean, you're passionate about young people. You're passionate about those that don't have a voice, or those that are not being easily understood, those that are being identified as what they're going through. You know, it's funny. I was doing some training earlier, you know, speaking to my team of mentors and, you know, just getting ready for the year and just really just remembering and reminding that we need to make sure we always considering and thinking of the young people as children. It don't matter how, you know, it doesn't matter how they're labeled by professionals or schools or even parents or whatever. But we have to always look at them and have that passion and look in their eyes, and from looking in their eyes, from our eyes, and show them that you're an innocent child and I'm here to make a difference in your life and that you're somebody. So we have that passion. You have that passion. You said that you was a young person that was hard to reach when you was growing up. But how even though that is a part of your story and it's powerful, and it's always powerful when someone has that as a part of their story, in a sense of the reason why they do what they do is that they have lived experience. But you must have a bit more, because how do you translate that into becoming a teacher and in becoming a professional, you know, being on the other side of the table, as they would say? How did you translate that, and how early in your life did you even consider wanting to be a teacher? Like bring up to speed, Karl.
Yeah, I'll give you the Twitter version. I was the Osama bin Laden of my school. So I always used to say when I was in the classroom, because a slight disclaimer is I've left the classroom. So I'm not a teacher, a day-to-day teacher anymore. I do, hence why I would, if I was a day-to-day teacher, I wouldn't be able to have this conversation, because I'll probably be chasing someone in a playground or something, doing a lineup or something.
Yes.
But how I did become a teacher, I was the Osama bin Laden of my school. So everything the young people did, I wrote the book. I was like the Mr. Miyagi of bad behavior. That's what I always say to the kids when I was in school. If you spoke to my 16-year-old self and said, one day you're going to be a teacher, I would have laughed my head off. My teachers would have laughed their heads off. Me become a teacher, it's like a criminal, like a master criminal becoming a cop. It just doesn't happen. But what happened is, life is, as you know, life is a very strange thing. I fell into teaching. Teaching was not a full. I'm going to give full disclosure here. Teaching was not in my career path. I wanted to be a musician when I was a child. That was my dream of dreams. Cut a very long story short, it didn't quite happen the way I wanted it to happen. I worked in the private sector for a while, but I wasn't satisfied. I was doing sales and stuff like that. So as we know, the credit crunch, for the younger viewers might not know or remember it, but I certainly do, and I'm sure Herman, you do as well. You look young though, sir. You might not remember it because you're very young. But obviously, it felt like what's happening today, where the world was going to end because the financial system was going to collapse. A lot of people lost jobs, so I took a redundancy package. They basically said we can give you a year's redundancy, or basically you can try and reapply for your job, but if you don't get your job, you basically, you've lost it. So it's kind of like, who wants to be a millionaire? Who wants to be a thousandaire? I was that guy that just cashed my chips and said, you know what, let me go and see what's out there. So I became a youth worker because I did enjoy working. Because I had a music background, I was quite good with the kids. And again, it's funny, Herman, because a lot of people don't account for luck or serendipitous moments, or depending on your belief system, or God, or whatever people believe, because certain things happen that you can't explain or you don't have any control over. And there was a guy called Matt that worked at the center. It was a music studio, who said to me, Karl, you're really good with the kids and they listen to you. Have you thought about being a teacher, and we can get you your teaching qualification? So I didn't go through the traditional route. So a traditional teacher goes and takes a PGCE, which is university-based, and then they go into the classroom, and then they become an NQT, which is so newly qualified teachers now become early career teacher. All these acronyms. I went round the other side of the mountain. So I started off as a youth worker and gained my qualifications through there. Then basically, to fast forward a bit, I became a NEETs coordinator, which was the most satisfying part of my most satisfying point of my career. And I was working in the East London, in a place called the Isle of Dogs. You know where Top Boy? I'm sure you know the show Top Boy.
Yes.
The film was round the corner from where I used to work. And when I worked there in the Isle of Dogs, this was 2014 roughly. When I started working there, this was at the height of the postcode wars. 25% of acid attacks. Thank God. And again, this is where the government did get it right, because they made buying acid if you're underage illegal, but 25% of all acid attacks took place in East London. So it was hardcore, but it was really making a difference. But because of austerity, they cut everything, as you know. So again, I found myself saying, what am I going to do now? Then I went into mainstream schooling. But this is where the luck piece comes into it, or the serendipitous piece comes into it. When I entered mainstream schooling, I realized I got a heck of a lot of training. I had training that my PGC colleagues did not, because as a NEETs coordinator, I worked a lot with the yacht team, youth offending team, for Matrix. I worked with CAMS, Child Adolescent Mental Health Services. So I was kind of like the SAS of dealing with behavior, because when you deal with a child in alternative provision, as I'm sure you know, they've been kicked out of one or more mainstream schools. They're on the verge of becoming a NEET, which is not an employment, education, or training, and they end up in a scenario where they get groomed to be in gangs. But what shocked me when I went into mainstream schooling was that my colleagues did not have this training at all. So I was going into classrooms and like, how did you talk to Michael? Like, Michael, he never behaves for anybody else. He only behaves for you. So cut a long story short, I realized, and I wrote Action Era Teacher as frustration, because people kept on coming up to me saying, how do you do this? And how do you do that? I was like, oh gosh, let me put it in a book. But what was really interesting, a side note with the book, is I told a colleague of mine, a black colleague of mine in the school, that I wanted to write a book. And he said to me something I'll never forget. He said, this is a great idea for a book because no one's going to take you seriously. And I said, what? And he goes, no one's going to take you seriously. He goes, how many black male authors do you see writing about education? Hardly any. I did my own research, private research, and I found before me, there's only 2 black male authors for education. The first one was a gentleman called Mr. Bernard Cord. He's in fact the former Prime Minister of Grenada, I believe. And he wrote a book called, it's a long title, I always forget it, but the miseducation, basically, or subeducation of Black Caribbeans in the schooling system. Really long title. That was 1970. Then a guy we all know called Dr. Tony Sewell wrote a book in 1998 called Black Masculinities in Schools. That was in 1998. And then I wrote my book in 2019. So it was basically once every 20 years, a black male writes a book about education. So I thought, you know what, this is ridiculous. Let me jump on. I'm happy to say there's a lot more now, which is great. I self-published. I only sold 30 copies in my first year, deemed as a failure. I certainly deemed it. I only sold 30 copies, and most of that was to my family and friends. I thought, wow, I'm not going to be J.K. Rowling. I'm not going to have my villa on a Portuguese beach somewhere. But that was the best decision I ever made in my life. 5 years on, it's taken me to places which is unbelievable. But we thank God.
Okay, so I feel that there's kind of a gap in the story for me, and I'm listening. No, not in your career story, just in your transformation story, because and it's interesting for me around. We was talking earlier in the training when I was talking to my staff. Was talking about ACEs. You know, talking about adverse childhood experiences, and a lot of times when children go through things when they're young, it really starts showing up in their adult life. It shows up in their 20s, in their 30s, and it happened in their childhood. So when you're sharing about, it sounds like you was very, well, you're putting yourself in that way. I don't know. It probably is that you was so misbehaved that you really understood the ninja tactics of bad behavior and so forth. But why did you go down that road instead of the other road? Was it the things that you experienced growing up? Was it childhood? Was it family? Was it emotional? What was the thing behind what motivated at that point before you got a certain wisdom about how you wanted to go about life?
Very good question. So a couple of things. So let's talk about why now looking back with my, not only as an adult, but with my teacher brain, I can kind of explain, which I couldn't explain as a child, and what changed. So let's talk about it first. So I was raised in a rough part of East London called Barking. Now it's become famous because a young man made a song about it. So whenever I tell people I'm from Barking, it's like I linked that girl from Barking or something. I'm like, I don't want to hear the song. But anyway, Barking had the ignominious reputation of being voted the worst place to live in the UK twice in a year. I don't think any other towns have ever had that in 2013, 2014. There's been a number of bad place to live. Obviously, when you're young, you don't know any better because you haven't seen any better. So the environment that I came from was very bad. The friendship groupings I had were not great. I think now looking back as an adult, my father, and again, I hate to say typical story, but my parents were together and my father left when I was about 11. So year 7, I left the home. So I think a lot of it was anger. It was a lot of rage. But as I always say in my trainings, I say anger is the bodyguard of pain. Okay. What I mean by that is what is more socially acceptable, especially for young men. So let's gender it for a second here. I know we're in interesting times, but let's gender it for a second. What is more socially acceptable? So if you've got somebody like myself who is very angry, and there's a lot of pain and trauma that their fathers left home, and it was a bit acrimonious between my mother and my father. What's more socially acceptable? For him to break down in class and cry about it, or for him to flip a table and swear at a teacher? So a lot of the times when I look at a lot of these young men, especially, I know that their behavior comes from a source of pain, but they haven't been given the tools to be able to process that pain properly. All right. And a lot of the times what we say to those young men is that you shouldn't be angry. You shouldn't be this, you shouldn't be that. But what ends up happening is that emotions, I call it energy in motion. Emotions, if they're not processed, don't disappear. So what you see, so for example, when I speak to people and they say, oh, this young man stabbed that young man, and I don't understand, it was over a trainer. It's a waste of life. Why are these young men like this? I say it's not about the trainer. You're missing the whole point, because people say, oh, they're stabbing each other for Canada Goose jackets or whatnot. What you don't know about that young man is he lives in substandard housing. His father is left. His mother is ill, and he's the carer. He's the carer of 4 kids. And again, looking at Top Boy, for example, I don't know if you watched the new ones. He had the character of Jamie. He was the son winner of the family. He's got all these social pressures. He's not allowed to walk down a certain street because there's a rival gang. So that young man that stepped on his shoe or looked at him the wrong way, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And that's an outlet. Now, I'm not condoning, by saying this, I'm not condoning the behavior. I'm not saying it's right. That young man, he snapped because all that pressure, all that energy and emotion that he hasn't processed came out in violence. And that is why it happened. And when you look at a lot of prisoners, there was a report by David Lammy, which was in 2021, because he was the Shadow Justice Secretary, and he was looking at incarceration. I believe over half of the inmates had some form, and he reckoned there was more, but over half had some form of SEN, special educational need, or social mental health need, which have been diagnosed but not been processed. So we've got a lot of traumatized people being put in a traumatized place. And that is what it was. So just to explain my story, I was in a particular place where I had a lot of anger. I had a lot of resentment. I didn't have anybody to kind of help me or shape me. But what changed my life was that I got a mentor. So when I was 16 years of age, I was very lucky. There was an uncle, I call him an uncle, we still talk to this day, he might even be watching, who basically took me under his wing and said, look, you can be more. You can be more than what you are. What you are, you're not just this guy running up and down the road. You're not this guy that makes music. You've got a talent. So over a period of about 10 years, he was molding and shaping me. So I think for me, that was the inflection point of my life. That was where my life started to go from going down the typical route to going down this particular route. And that's what changed me.
Yeah. That's powerful. And thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. There's a real power in our stories. And I don't know about yourself, but I know a lot of times we as people, and I'll speak for myself, like when I was, becoming a professional and working in professional environments and reinventing myself, I was not really trying to share the fullness of my story because I wanted to be able to reinvent myself and not fall into a stereotype or a pigeonhole or so forth, because I felt that I was more than what I perceive myself to be, but I was on the journey. And
Absolutely.
at times I kind of never shared that story, or never shared the parts of the story that I wasn't proud of. And that was the part that was needed to be shared for me, and for others to realize that they're not alone, and that a lot of us have to go through this to become who we were actually born to be. So when I'm listening to your story, and I say this to mentors, when I train mentors to become mentors, I train and I share that the power of their story is what makes them a powerful mentor. You know, the fact that they've got lived experience, and, you know, that they can translate that lived experience, because they do need to transform first, because you can't give what you don't possess, and you can only bring people as far as you've been. So it just depends how much you want to transform people, concerning how much you need to transform yourself, you know. But the story is what gives people hope, because there's going to be a young person, or there's going to be a parent to a young person that could hear that story. You know, they could see your accolades, they could see all the great things you've done, they could see the circles you're in, the places you're speaking, and they could see the start, and they could say, okay, if you could get there, then definitely my son can get there, or I could get there, or so forth. So I think that's very powerful. It was really good to hear concerning your, you know, your uncle, this figure, this male figure that came and really became a mirror, because they would say, look, here's the mirror to you, you could be more than what you see, but I see it already, but please believe me that you are more than what you perceive to be, which is amazing. And I was kind of waiting for, what is the inflection point, what's the transformation, what's the cocoon, so to speak. But if you reflect now and you say, okay, if I was to talk back, if I was to talk to my 15-year-old self, my 14-year-old self, before I met that mentor, what would you have said that you needed? And the other thing I'm really interested in as well is, because I believe that this question is relevant for young people that that are actually now walking in your shoes, that probably have people around them that probably don't know what needs to be said. But if you could talk back, you know, if you could just go in the Back to the Future, you know, DeLorean, go back, jump out, see yourself, and reason to yourself, what is it that you needed to hear?
That's a great question, Herman. That is a great question. Let me start off with this. I think, and again, no, not I presume, I'm pretty sure, because I've done this work. What I think, I'm going to give you a word of what I think my younger self needed, and it was intimacy. Now, that word intimacy has now become perverted, or people think of something sexual, then like Jodeci or something like that.
Yeah.
Let's put that to one side, okay? We're not talking about R&B here. What I'm talking about, right? I'm telling the truth. Because people say, oh, you know, Karl's talking about intimacy with kids. I wasn't talking about that. Hear what I'm saying. You know, we're in this age where people click things, and then all of a sudden you get cancelled. So I really want to make sure I explain myself. When we talk about intimacy, I love the term when somebody says into me see, right? Into me. I think what that young man needed was, the young man, the 15-year-old me, felt lost. He felt no one really saw me for who I was. And I think what that young man needed, if I could talk to him, I would say, you're fine as you are. You're okay. You don't. That young man needed to prove himself. So he used disruptive ways to prove himself. He needed to prove himself that he was good enough, that he was okay.
Why? I need to jump in there. I want you to flow, but this is a very important point to know. I can't miss this point. Why do you feel that he needed to prove himself?
Very simple. There was, because of, wow, this is deep. You know, I didn't expect it to be this deep, but I'm happy to do it though. But this is deeper than I thought it would be. But this is like therapy. But I think what it was it's true. What it was that I felt deficient because my father wasn't about. I felt deficient because I felt that I could not do the things that children in better positions than me could do. So, for example, I was raised in the hood, so I couldn't go and watch theatre. So what I did in my mind, there's a saying, what you don't accept, you reject. What that means is, I can't have it.
Wow.
I'm not going to even want it. So, for example, if somebody says, "Oh, I want to take you to the theatre," right? Because in my head, I didn't feel good enough to go theatre. I'm just using an example. Instead of me saying, "I don't want to go theatre," I'll say, "Theatre is rubbish, man." Right? So a more practical example would be, I remember, in fact, I've got a particular story that came to mind. I used to love books. When I was in year 10, year 11, I loved reading. You'd always catch me with a book in my hand. Now, around the time my dad wasn't about, I remember I had my bag full of books and I was coming back from school. Now, my mum was concerned because she of my friendship grouping. So she put me in a school outside of the area. So she didn't want me to go to the same school as the boys in the area. But I used to still hang about with them. They lived on my road, isn't it? And they lived in the neighborhood. So you could see them. Even though you had uniforms, you would still see them. And I'll never forget this. My books. And my book split. I don't know if it split or but basically all the books fell all everywhere. And I remember I was hanging about with a group of friends and they were like, why are you reading books, man? What's wrong with this guy, man? Nerdy guy, bro. Why are you reading these books, bro? Throwing the books and they were laughing. So something in my head clicked and said, books are bad. So all of a sudden, I wasn't paying attention in school. I wasn't, because I related being smart to being, it's almost like something like 1984 double think, isn't it? It's like smart is stupid. You know what I mean? Being a nerd is not something to be desired. Whereas I say now, nerds are great. Nerds design the world. The Bill Gates was a road. He wasn't Duchesne or Sully from Top Boy. These guys, nerds are what make the world run, right? So I felt I had to. So going back to your question about proving myself, I felt that I had to fit in. So I had to fit in with the bad youths when they're doing their robberies or when they're doing their nonsense. Or, my friends were drug dealers. Thankfully, I never sold any drugs or got involved with that. My friends were drug dealers, so always being a lookout because I felt I had to fit in and I had to show that I'm this guy. And but again, it came from because I had before my mentor, I didn't really have somebody to affirm me and say, Karl, it's okay to read. Karl, it's okay to be smart. Karl, it's okay to, want to have more for your life. That was where the proving came from. That's where the misbehavior came from. So what I was thinking to myself is, you're good as you are. You don't have to follow the crowds. You can be your own man, and this, don't let this, people talk about thinking outside the box. I say, think outside the block, right? Don't let this town define you. You are bigger than this town. This town is the town. This postcode is not yours. You don't own it. You're not the mayor of Park. You can go elsewhere, you can live somewhere else. But that's what I would say to him. It's just to see him and say, you're cool outside of the bravado, the bad behavior. Dude, you're okay. Dude, you can do this. Dude, you don't have to serve everybody. That's what I would say to him.
Wow, what you're saying is powerful to me. When you said you needed intimacy, I fully got it. I fully got it. There's nothing misconstrued. I think sometimes when we think about children or we think about boys, there is like a social block, that exists. That people don't think boys need that gentleness or boys need that kind of emotional adherence or that emotional support. And I think a lot of times a lot of boys are being lost in that narrative. I definitely can say that as a man now, and me even going back and doing therapy and me going through and going through what I experienced or what I thought or because in hindsight, what it is, in hindsight, you can go back to certain places in your life with a certain wisdom and perspective and understanding that you have now. But when you was going through that part of your life, you was limited to what you knew then. So you processed it and you called it what you called it then. And a lot of times, unless we revisit those moments and then reframe those moments, and then because we've got understanding of life now, because as a child, a lot of times you're going to draw conclusions that are inaccurate. You know, like as a child, when their parents split up, a lot of times they can think, oh, it's my fault, or I've done something, or what is it that I've done that's made this happen, you know. And I feel that a lot of boys miss the tenderness from a man.
Absolutely.
I feel that they miss the tenderness from a man that can talk to them and can say that it's okay, you know, it's okay, you know, crying. It's okay if you feel sad. It's okay if, you know, you just so they can be awakened to this different world of their feelings, this different world that is shut off to a lot of boys. Because when you're a boy, I mean, when I'm growing up, I'm thinking about watching Commando and watching, you know, it's all, you know what I mean? It's all this fights, kung fu films, it's all these kind of things. And it's like society, and then it's James Bond, you know what I mean? It's like you got to have the Aston Martin, you got to have all the girls, you got to have this kind of identity. And a lot of that is what narrows a young person, a young boy's world or perspective of the world, understanding all their inner world. But when you said intimacy, that really touched, because a lot of these boys that are becoming men, because like you say, like if you have to become a carer, it's the same thing. I had to do that. Like I was like, my dad left when I was 10, he weren't around, and I had younger siblings, and I had to be that role, and I had to support my mom, and I had to like grow up kind of quickly. And sometimes when you do grow up kind of quickly, you miss the innocence of your youth, or you miss, you know, if there was someone there that could do all of that stuff, that you could just do the foolish things, that would help. So I feel that it's very perceptive what you shared around intimacy, around, you know, feeling insufficient, or, you know, there was a deficit, and bravado had to make you feel that was the thing that you had to use to fit in. And what you shared about the story in your books, and I feel like this is something that we do need to validate young people, and validate young people that are not going down the road where they're doing things. And I'm talking about boys now, because we're going back to boys, because it's okay for girls to read books. It's okay for girls to cry. It's okay for girls to do all these different kind of things. But it's like what my mum said to me, the same emotions and tears that God put in a girl, he put in a man. You know, you know, so so it's me understanding that. But yeah, I just felt that was a part of your purpose, a part of your calling, a part of your aptitude, a part of where you're going. Because look at where you are now, and that's what you was doing. That's what you was doing there. So I just feel it's powerful what you've shared, and I feel it's powerful what you're sharing in your work. Okay, we're going to move on now, because unless, is there something that you wanted to say?
One last thing I wanted to say on that. I do a lot of work with local authorities. So I've done some work with Hackney. I'm doing some work with Croydon. And what is interesting, they come to me and they say, why do kids join gangs? That we don't understand it. Why do these young people throw their lives away? Why are they getting involved in knives and gun? You know, why are they doing this? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And of course, it makes perfect sense to me. Because what you have to understand about human beings, especially young men, if we look at, so I've done sociology as a degree, so I kind of know this stuff. Young men before, pre-industrialization, had what is known as rites of passage. I'm sure, in fact, if you, for example, look at the Jewish community, they have something called a bar mitzvah, which is, you have to take an exam to be a man, right? You have to take an exam. So they'll go in a synagogue, they'll read passage of the Torah, and they will say this, and then you say you are officially a man at the age of 13, right? If you look at certain African cultures, they'll go on a hunt. If you look in India, there were certain things that they had to do. So men had to be validated by other men, all right? Now, in the state of our industrialized society, there are no rites of passage anymore, right? So what we did in our post-industrial society, a rite of passage was, for example, you go to work, you get married, and you buy a house. For most
Yeah.
people now, that's extremely difficult. So how do you define a man? So
Mm.
what ends up happening with these young people is, number one, when they join the gang, they go through some form of ritual. So think of, as I gave the examples, maybe hunting. The ritual could be go and stab that guy or go and rob a shop, right?
Okay.
Once they go through a particular ritual, then they get affirmed by the other males of the group. Their identity starts to change. And another thing you'll notice in these rituals is that usually you get something added to your name, or something happens where you almost like your identity, you're no longer a child, right?
Okay.
You're a man.
Okay.
Then you get a street name. You're Spider now. You're not Karl, you're Spider, or you're Goku or whatever, right?
Yeah,
then you get affirmation. You see the younger say, that guy's my older. He's my older, right? The guy's 14, the other guy's 17. He's 3 years older, but he sees him like an elder, somebody whom to follow. So what ends up happening is that these young men are going in gangs to get what they used to get in society. So when I speak to these local authorities, I said, what we can do is we can do our own initiations, but let them be positive. Show them. And what happens is that the gang enforces codes of what it is to be a man. They're getting taught. And because, unfortunately, many of these young men don't have fathers in the home, they don't know what a man is. So the elder, quote unquote, the 17-year-old, is telling them a man is strong, a man punches somebody in the face. So they're getting the rules and the structure, because that's what men traditionally did. So if you look at it from an I can't say the word, but you know,
anthropology. Yeah, yes, I get it.
I'll probably say it when I come off the call. But if you look at it from a historical view of how humans, especially young men, used to congregate, because what used to happen, especially in Africa, is that the men will go on hunting trips. They wouldn't see their mums. They'll be taken. In fact, if you read the book Roots, Kunta Kinte, that was one of the things he described when he was bloodied, and he was circumcised and he became a man, and he went on a hunting trip. And you can go for weeks with these men, and you're learning and all these types of things. Modern society has not placed that in there. So when people say to me, "Oh, youth, why are youth centers? It's just it's a pool table and a PlayStation 2. What's the point of it?" I say, no, this is a positive place they can gather, and another positive male role model can come in and give them the same initiations or the same things that they could get from a gang, but in a more positive way. And that is what is fascinating when you look at it. That is what these young men are doing. So they're not joining the gang. It is destructive, but you've got to understand they're getting something out of it. But most of them realize that because it's negative, it starts to unravel. They go to jail, they end up dying, their friends die, they don't do their education. But by the time that happens, it's not. So that's why they do it. That's all I want.
Well, I mean, you're bringing us down a rabbit hole here, like Karl. We just don't have that much time to jump down this rabbit hole. But it's so what you're saying. Oh my! I mean, you know me. I'm the mentor's mentor. I mentor mentors, and my whole life, my life's work has been mentoring, and it's been not around the behavior deficit model of mentoring, which is more around behavior management. It's more around mentorship, more around helping people to become who they already are, and creating those environments where they can have personal development, they can have they can discover social etiquette, they can understand what are the things that's acceptable and what are it's like it is so needed for young people. You know what I mean? Like I see mentoring, it's even like parenting, to tell the truth, because even like sometimes as a mentor, you're having conversations with a mentee that they're not even having with their parents because their relationship could be fraught, or the dad isn't there. The dad isn't even there to have a conversation. So they're upset about the fact that the dad's not there. You know what I mean? They're angry that the dad's not there, and that's why they're kicking off in school, or that's what's happening, or the fact that they're in gangs because they want a sense of belonging. They want to be able to feel like they belong. So the gang replaces the family, because even in the family, it might just be mum there, but it's just them and mum. And really, when they're at home, they see mum's pain because financial pressures or things are not happening at home. So then they're seeing the family is able to help them to be able to help their mum. Do you know what I mean? But then the boy becomes like the man of the house, because the boy is sometimes bringing in more money than the mum. And then sometimes, like, that could be how they get the money's wrong. But the mum, if the mum doesn't have values, or the mum is extremely pressured because being extremely pressured can really, you know, skew the line. That makes mum then take the boy as a provider. So then that's like a false kind of initiation, because you're not ready yet to be a man. You know, being a man is more than bringing money. It's more than providing. I think a lot of us as men that grow up, because we never had a man in our house, we never had a father that was doing that. An aspiration is to provide, but then we're just going to work and just providing finances. But we need to provide emotional stability. We need to provide emotional safety. We need to provide spiritual guidance. We need to, and that's where then a lot of us as men come undone, because holistically, we don't have the package. We don't have the package, you know. So, I mean, just you saying that just made me feel, I just had to say something about that. And I mean, I could see, I mean, there's so many comments that are coming through the live stream that I'm not even able to answer right now. But some people are saying, you know, into me, see such a powerful and authentic sharing, you know, powerful conversation around raw truths, and helps so many. And Karl is so powerful and insightful. So there's so much saying about you. So it's so powerful what he's saying. And these kind of conversations, I feel, unless we are liberated from false masculinity and toxic masculinity, we're not able to talk power to truth and talk and be real and be honest, because I feel that there's a lot of us that need this support and need this guidance when it comes to working with young people. So listen, I'm realizing we don't have too much left now. But what would you say? No, we're gonna need it. We're gonna need a part two. We're gonna need a part two. In your thinking, because I just want to understand in a few minutes.
Sure.
What do people need to hear right now about young people, especially those that are in education, those that are talking to Gen Zs, those that are talking to the young people that need support, those that are coming from that kind of background that the school may not identify, but they need to understand their voice needs to encompass that they're talking to that range of young people. What do the adults need to know? What do the parents need to know? I know we've only got a few minutes. We're going to need to jump on it next time.
And part two. How many minutes have we got?
We got 3 minutes. 3 minutes.
3 minutes. I'm all right for time. If you want to extend it, I'm okay for time, but I don't know. It's up to you.
3 minutes. We're going to finish
3 minutes. Okay, of course. All right. You've given me a challenge. All right, 3 minutes. It's basically what I've said. Intimacy. Talk to your kids. Somebody gave me, I love this saying. Children spell love Time. Have time. Okay. Talk to them. When your son gets in from school, how's your day at school? I know what it's like. You're pressured. Cost of living. Rishi Sunak is raising tax. Trains, food, everything's being raised. You're working around the clock all the time. But have dedicated time with your kids, please. Like, I'm talking to parents now. Find activities. It doesn't even have to be expensive. You don't have to go Nando's. Just let's go for a walk together. Sometimes, especially with young men, they won't want to open up straight away. So the best thing to do is just plan an activity where they don't even have to talk too much. Fix a bed. Something maybe kinesthetic. Spend time. So that's what I'll say to the parents, right? Kids spell love Time. Have time, because a lot of these young men that are killing other young men or whatnot, or not even young men, but young people, is because the parents haven't got time. And I'm not blaming the parents. It's just the environment we're in. For educators, it's very, very simple. Again, which is an offshoot of that. We've got to be detectives of behavior, right? Behavior is a symptom of something else going on. So if they put me in a school and a kid throws a chair, of course, I'm not saying don't sanction or whatnot, what have you, but think in your head, what triggered this young person to throw the chair? We need to be more trauma informed and understand, remember, emotions are energy and motion, right? He threw that chair or that was swore at you, it came from somewhere. Sometimes it's deeper than they even understand it, but become a detective. Rather than being quick to punish, and again, sanctions have their place, use those sanctions to restore. All right. Sorry, really quickly, because time is going. There's a difference between punishment and discipline. And this is why people get really nervous about it. Punishment, the Latin word of punishment comes from punere, which means penalty. It means something to cut down, to hurt. But if you look at discipline, it comes from the Latin word disciplulus, which means learner. All right. So discipline, teach them the way. You don't just punish to hurt, but there's a difference between hurting and harming someone. If you're a bad tooth, the doctor has to drill your tooth. He's hurting you, but to fix it. Harm is where you want it's a long-term bad outcome. Sometimes we have to hurt to get through to the problem. We have to take that tooth out or have that operation. So when you look at your children rather than punish them, that's I think my time.
Your time's up, and you've done it in such a succinct and amazing way. A part two is definitely, we're definitely going to do a part two. But listen, share with people where they can come and find out more about your work, and where best to connect with you.
Connect if you're on LinkedIn. I'm here, Karl Poupe. So it's Papa Uniform, Papa Echo. Karl is in Karl Marx. Best way to find me, actionheroteacher.com. So if you just remember Action Hero Teacher, put that in Google. I'll be right at the front. It's got all my Twitter, Instagram. I'm more on LinkedIn, to be honest. LinkedIn's my social media home. But if you ever are like, where's Karl? Action Hero Teacher, go to my website. All my details are there. Come and find me and come and chat to me. If you enjoyed it, put in I don't know if I can see the comments, but please, after DM me, chat to me, and yeah, we'll take it from there. I do consultancy as well.
Wow, we're going to do part two. We're going to have to work this out. We're going to have to work out the date. We'll get it in the diary. We'll get back and we talk about more of this stuff, because this is a conversation that needs to be had, and we could tell more people to come, because I mean, all those that have been commenting, they've really been encouraged by the conversation. And I want to say thank you for all you've done. Thank you for your transparency, your honesty, and how you've shared. It's been powerful, and you don't know who it's been touching, who it's been encouraging, and who it's been enlightening for the next step that they need to take. So I just want to say thank you, and thank you for everyone that has come and joined me on the Herman Stewart Mentoring Show. And I will be back in next 2 weeks, the same time, and we will have another guest, and we will be speaking about these things. Take care and have a great day.
Take care, guys.